Welcome back, Poggers, to another episode of the Pog State. I'm your host, Atlus. This is Valdes. These guys over here are Chronicler and Wolf, or Mau Mau and Wolf, because we want to have a bit of an animal theme over on that side of the desk. Week 6 for us is just about to wrap up. We got a couple of series still to go. You guys have seen them. Please, no spoilers. Although you can't go back in time, at least not as far as I am aware. Week 7 is about to begin. That should be tomorrow for you guys, if you are watching this as it comes out. Very exciting matches as well, as in a couple of days, theoretically, for you guys. You've got Gen G versus T1. There has been some very exciting news that has occurred over the last couple of weeks. LS has come back to Korea. We have welcomed him back with open arms. A little bit of a shame of what happened with C9, but we don't really talk about the rest of the world here on the Pog State. We like to keep things very close to home, and there has been definitely enough to talk about in Korea this week. And we like addressing elephants in the room. Yes, animal themes will continue throughout the day. Elephants in the room are certainly things that we like to talk about, and so let's dive into it. T1 versus Damwon Kia. The series itself, how things went. Let's just start with breaking down how that match went, because I think that a lot of people have concerns about Damwon Kia at the moment and their performance.
I really don't. I feel like this is...
Really?
Yeah, no, not really. This was exactly what I expected coming into the split. Like, getting 2-0 by T1 is... Who cares? It's T1. Like, they're beating anyone. And Damwon Kia coming into the split, like, yes, Showmaker and Canyon are extremely good, but considering the fact that Showmaker was very clearly burned out by the end of... Or even during MSI, but, like, I think even during Worlds, you could see that it was missing a lot of the spark that was there in 2020. You get a bot lane who, while obviously being a huge upgrade in lane, also shout out to Dogdom for the T1 match where he almost carried, but not quite. And then you have an unexperienced top laner who, unfortunately, is not Zeus, so he's playing like an inexperienced top laner and getting bodied and slowly getting better. So I think that Damwon Kia are very much on track to being a truly good team by like summer again. They'll make playoffs, right? Because they're still not going to lose to like bottom 4, bottom 5 teams because they have Canyon.
Yeah, Canyon's pretty good.
And Showmaker, unfortunately, has had his ups and downs. But I honestly, this was very much in line with what I expected at the start of the split. And I would have liked a 2-1 here, but I think this was always going to be a T1 win.
I do have concerns about Damwon Kia. I think that...
Good. I wasn't just like crazy on my own. Thanks, Wolf. Oh, God.
I think that we're seeing Showmaker again, especially against T1. Like, he has these strange picks. I wouldn't call Ahri a strange pick, but it felt personal, right? Like, oh, best Faker or best Ahri in the league. Faker on the other side. Like, let me see what I can do. Let me play this Ahri. Didn't work out very well for him. I have to say, I feel like when I watch the Damwon Kia players walk on stage, we have the walkouts every day, they look really unhappy. They look really stressed out. I think it's maybe a product of being dominant for so long and now being like number 3, number 4, they're oscillating between the two. And you're like, well, how does this feel? Like, this is quite unusual. Showmaker in particular, not on top right now. Canyon as well, doesn't look too happy at the moment. Then you go back and watch those walkouts, you can really feel the tension in that team. And even though I think they are improving a lot, it feels like the synergy that we come to expect from Damwon Kia didn't come naturally this time. Like with Khan, it felt very natural. It looked like he actually improved the team's communication, improved the atmosphere on the team a lot, and he was a great top laner. People will argue about Nuguri versus Khan until the end of the time. That's not important here, but the transition we have this time for Damwon Kia is much larger than what we saw with the Khan swap in. And I think Damwon Kia were just like, hell yeah, we got Khan. This is great. Like, he's so good for our team. We're communicating really well. And then Birdall plus Hoya, who's in the background, and then Kel and Dukdom, it feels very, very different. And Damwon Kia are taking longer to adjust than I think other teams like Kwangdong Freaks and DRX, who have made massive improvements over the last few weeks.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is, as you mentioned, it is like a transition period. And I think that much like the way we're seeing Nongsim kind of get bodied by all the corona issues and stuff like that, I think that the start of the split for Damwon was just like, our top laner doesn't exist. How are we going to win with Hoya, who is basically dropping the ball in every single game? And then they started to play Birdall, but he's very inexperienced. So it was a larger, I think, kind of investment period for them at the beginning of spring to really get like a foundation underneath them. And I think we're seeing the effects of that right now. Like, it's still spring, it's still relatively early. Like, we're at the 2/3 mark at the end of this week, at the time of the recording. So I'm not as worried. I think if you're a Dom1 fan, it can feel like, well, these guys were the best, and now they're like, everything's kind of falling apart. But I think they just need a little bit more time. I think I'm kind of with Mao on this one, but I think we'll see by playoffs, what kind of team this really is, because if they also get bodied in playoffs, then that is kind of worrisome, because they do have a really impressive roster still.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of like a ratio issue here that you have to go into for Dom1 because you can talk about the fact that they are rebuilding and things like this, but that doesn't stop them from being, multi-time LCK champions looking for that 4th title in a row. Like, they have incredible expectations on their shoulders, and there's like an expectation to understanding that like this is a rebuilding period, to just face value of what happened with the team, right? And if, like, as far as like the roster changes, so Dom and Kellen coming in, I think a lot of people would just say that on paper looks like an upgrade. This team should theoretically be better. But I think it's really cool, like what you said, Wolf, about the fact that Khan's left, and for environment, for any team that I've ever seen Khan on, the guy is just like full of energy, full of positivity. And he's one of these players that is really, really good at being uplifting. I think you can put Peanut in that category. You can definitely put Umpty in that category when he's playing well. Peter, for the casting team, definitely one of those uplifting players.
Yeah.
Any challenger player.
Any challenger player for Chronicler. Yes, he is a big fan, as we generally know. But I just don't think that Dom1 has that at the moment. And I think, like, you put the expectation of, like, this is an incredible bottom lane in Dom and Kellen coming into the team, but you unfortunately lose a shot-calling voice in Beryl, and then Khan retires, and you lose that positivity. And I think that there is, like, actually a lot more lost from Dom1 that we didn't necessarily factor in as much, or like the fan base didn't necessarily factor in as much.
You can't see it,
Yeah. And so, like, the expectation, whilst still being really high, like, the output potential of this team is not reaching that. And therefore, you're, like, emotionally drained even more, and you miss Khan even more, and then it's like it starts the spiral. And then you have Showmaker going 2-9-5 in a series when we know that this guy is better than that, right?
It's also... what's the score for them on Kia right now? Like 7-5, 6-6? Not 100% sure.
I think it's higher than that.
Yeah, it probably is. But like they
seven.
lost.
They're like 7-4.
7-4.
Oh, there you go. And they
7-4,
lost.
7-5.
They lost twice to T1. They lost once to Gen G, and they lost once to Nongshim. And this was also when Nongshim was like an actual team that wasn't repeatedly ganked by COVID. So, I again, like I've been saying this since the beginning, I think that Dom1 was a team that had built the synergy within their team and how everything works. And as much as I think he was justly criticized as an individual player, Ghost was also a pivotal part of that roster, because Ghost, you take the shitty pick, you take the blind pick, you get pummeled in lane because it doesn't matter, right? And they'd been building that synergy for 4 years. Give or take. I think it was a little less, maybe 3 years, but from challengers to, and there were small changes, obviously Nuclear to Ghost, and Nuguri Khan felt like a very fluent transition, I think, because the core of the team didn't change. But this is just not the same team anymore, and we're gonna have to accept that. Is that going to be enough for spring? I don't think that it will be, but I do think that if they maintain this roster, I would be really sad if they change the roster after spring.
I want to add something too, something that Atlus and I talked about actually off camera during our desk segment the other day, is that Dom1 Kia last year, they added Khan to the team and they got Coma, and it was like, oh, this is really cool. And it felt like the team was just already kind of built from step one. But this year, they have Danny is kind of stepping into the coaching role a little bit more. He's taking care of drafts, but it seems like he's kind of like the head coach. And Danny's more of an analyst than a leader, I think. And this is a Dom1 Kia that won't just... I personally disagree with some of these takes, because I don't think Dom1 Kia just needs time. They actually need leadership, and they need someone to explain how this team is going to be shot called. And Showmaker and Canyon can carry this team against all of the teams that you didn't mention, like that they lost to, because they beat all of the bottom teams, right? But I think against some of the top teams, if Damwon Kia wants to go back to the elite, like the lack of Coma, because he's kind of been pushed into a different role here for the team, which is what Atlus and I were talking about the other day, is going to hurt them. And I don't think this team just will organically get better, because Dukdam and Kellen were also amazing innate talent on Nongshim that wasn't coached to like their full potential either. And now they're like over here, like, oh, I got on the Damwon Kia roster, like I'm just gonna automatically be the best bot duo because that's what everyone was saying about us, and now we're on the best team theoretically if we can actually pull this off. And I just don't think it's going to just happen. Like, I think there needs to be like some strong coaching. There needs to be some looking at how you're going to play around the top. So I don't think a roster change is required. I do agree with that. But I don't expect that like just over time Damwon will be the best. Like, it'll just happen, guys. Just wait. Don't worry. I'm kind of worried. Like, I don't think they're improving fast enough. And I don't know if there's any real push within the team to try to figure out how this team works together. I think Danny's focus has always been on the draft. That's what he's strong at. In terms of growing a team, like, T1 disagreed with his philosophy on that so much they kicked him out. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a lot
if
of
it
people that
happens
share
on its
that
own.
opinion as well. That's a conversation for another time, I think. But yeah, no, I think that it's really hard with Damwon Kia to really understand what's going on behind the scenes, because there's a lot of assumptions you just made,
True.
right? And I think that when you talk about giving a team time, that's kind of exactly what Chronicler was talking about, right? Is that theoretically, if you're a world-class organization and team that just, the most recent Korean team to win Worlds, you'd probably say that they're world-class, right? You'd expect them to be able to provide infrastructure in order to solve an issue that we as outsiders looking in can very clearly see, right? So I think that giving them the benefit of the doubt is deserved at this stage, like talking like just over halfway through spring. But if this is like still going when we get to the beginning of summer, that's when we're like, like that's when Wolf is like referencing back. He's like, do you remember that episode of the Pog State? I
All I'm
told
saying
you
is
this, Atlas.
right now I'm like the doctor is like, I see your symptoms, like come back in one more half of a round robin if like it hasn't improved, because we're gonna have to prescribe something.
Yeah, we'll give you a cream.
I'm looking at these symptoms and I'm like, all right, like you got about 3 more weeks of regular season. If you haven't fixed it by then, like come see me, because we're gonna have to write something up.
I think that's all true, but at the same time, like Chronicler was saying, like the team is still performing well, and even though we have like really high expectations for them, they do now live in a world with a totally new and improved Gen G roster, and also T1, which might be one of the best teams we've had in years, right? So like, we have a lot of expectations, but I think we need to give time to like the top lane to really develop and for them to develop as a team. And also, I think the competition is even higher this year. So like, at the same time, I don't know. I'm ready to wait and see, because Damwon were world class, and I think they're still a fantastic team, but the stakes have been raised, and T1 is really kind of like, now we're the best. We're the world class team. We're on top, and they're the huge favorites to win spring, right? So Damwon, they have some other worries. They need time, I think, to really to get there, to even become close to trying to challenge even Gen G, let alone T1.
Yeah, I don't think that there was ever a world where we expected Damwon Kia to beat T1. I was just a little bit disappointed with the way that they played against T1, right? Because it wasn't close.
No.
It wasn't even a little bit
well,
close.
I think in game number 2, had the elephant not happened, we might have had a slightly different series, because I think that Dogdom actually played exemplary on Ezreal in that one, and actually almost managed to pull it together. And I do agree with Valdes that overall the things with Damwon are just gonna have to see. I do think that they were playing 4v5 for the first 3-4 weeks, and that's not a thing anymore. So that's good.
It really stunts your growth as a team to deal with that.
But
actually,
it actually was like, because we joke about it, but Hoya performed way worse than he ever had on Frederick, so clearly,
Yeah.
like, just the pressure.
And he didn't perform very well on Frederick.
Well, no, but he was
just to add context to that one.
Yeah, no, he was kind of there, and he existed. But like on Dahlmann, it didn't even feel like that happened. He was actively a detriment to the team, and then Birdle was subbed in, and you initially saw why Hoya started over Birdle, because Birdle looked even worse. But by this point, I think Birdle is just a middle of the pack LCK top laner.
Yeah, he's serviceable now.
Yeah, and that happened like 4-5 weeks in. So it's kind of a unfortunate start. The funny thing is that we'll only talk about Damwon Kia because, like, what do you say about T1? They are the best.
Yeah, that's what I was
They
going to
beat
segue
everyone.
to. Yeah, that's
It's
what I was going
just-
to segue to.
Yeah.
I was like,
We
okay.
beat that dead horse many
There's,
times to keep the animal theme going. You know?
Yeah, there we go.
Love
Beating
me
dead
some Animal
horses.
Farm.
Thought
And-
about that one. Yeah.
But the horse is not dying anymore because
True.
the horse is now winning, which is actually kind of cool. Woo! Animal references. There is one thing I do want to talk about as far as as far as T1 is concerned, because I think T1 has eclipsed the comparisons to Damwon over the last couple of years, and are now getting towards comparisons with themselves
old-
7
yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
Like that's where we've got to. It's like Damwon weren't actually dominant enough. The other comparison that you can go to is actually Griffin and their run that was ended by Gen G after 12 in a row,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool.
Because how many Griffin players are on that
Gen G
roster
team
that they're playing?
There's a few.
That
Yeah,
they're playing for their 13th match now that they're 12-0.
Yeah. Narrative.
I do think I don't want to get into the Damwon Kia legacy versus SK Telecom versus T1 2022 legacy conversation yet, because Damwon could surprise us, even though I'm the guy who's being the negative Nancy about it right now, and like actually take the 4th title and have like the sickest playoff run. But I think that's a conversation we can have after.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the game itself though a little bit, like the actual elephant a little bit, because
Yeah, I think it's time to get into it. We gotta have the
We gotta do it.
I gotta gear myself up. All right, here we go. Let's talk about the pause that did happen. I will first lay down just the groundwork for what we were doing. It was game 2, and at the beginning of game number 2, we had a pause. Wolf and I, as per usual, when a pause happens, just started talking about random stuff. The pause continued, though, for an extraordinary amount of time before we got some insight into this situation. The situation was Faker ran out of base. He had been experiencing audio issues prior to this, and they were resolved, theoretically. And so, known issue had happened. New one crops up, and he can't hear sound out of each ear evenly. And so gets towards the mid lane, the game's been going for about a minute or something like that. Says to the ref, can we pause? My headset is not working. The ref asks him to wait a moment, I think is the pretty accurate translation of the situation. And Faker says, it's not really, I don't know what's going on. And he was frustrated, or it seemed like he was a little bit frustrated, right? Very professional, but a bit annoyed that sound wasn't working in his headset. The ref...
He's sharing info, he's saying it's working on the left side, it's working on the right, so he's like, I can hear both sides for a second, he's sharing information with the ref.
Doing a lot of testing his microphone, things like that, just to make sure that he knew what was going on. The ref then gave him permission to pause the game, and as Faker was attempting to pause the game, he accidentally pressed his flash button, because in order to pause a game, you can no longer forfeit, it was news to me. I actually thought the function was still there. You just weren't allowed to do it. And on some clients, it's different. But on the Korean client, you just type /FF to pause the game. That is how you pause. So if you don't press the slash, you generally just F. And that's, for us flashers out there, for dlashes, you're totally okay. Because you're not going to teleport to a brush, that doesn't have anything in it. Especially not at the beginning of the game. We've solved that issue with the new teleport. So... for flashes, it can be a bit of an issue here, and Faker unfortunately flashed, and then we go into the pause, and then the debacle ensues. Do you guys agree with everything we've said so far?
I think that's a pretty good,
It's a really great opening statement.
yeah, it's a really good, list of the events. Like, the facts are out there of what happened in order.
Checks YouTube
I guess it is
comments.
important.
Thank you, counselor.
It is important to note that all of this happened in game, as you mentioned, and all 10 players were active on the Rift. And when it happened at that time, when you and I were casting, I thought that it was early enough because we didn't see a whole lot of what happened in game, that no one had actually seen each other on the Rift. But in fact, the top laners actually saw each other on the 5-point start. There were comms talking about, oh, they're top, like I see them. So actually, players did interact with each other in terms of vision being exchanged before the pause happened and before the flash happened. So there was like a case for this game should not be remade in any circumstance because players have actually seen each other.
Yeah,
Players
strategies
don't see each
have
other,
been given away. Yeah.
Exactly. If no one sees each other at all, then usually this type of game can be remade. Or if like people are still walking out of the base and something like this happens, like you can remake because no actual gameplay has happened, but they did see each other. So I wanted to add that aspect.
All right, so now that we've laid that groundwork, let's take a pause to talk about how a pause is actually supposed to be handled based on the rulebook and just pauses in general, because you've seen many, many pauses. Sometimes players will receive penalties for pausing without due reason, things like this. But pauses generally need to be requested, and thankfully Chronicler has a rule set for us. Take it away, lawyer boy.
Love me some rule sets. So, there are two types of pauses that you're allowed to take. One is a directed pause, which is a referee just saying, pause the game. Right? This is something that if a referee identifies that like something is happening that is not okay, the referee can always pause the game, and that is, no matter what, is fine. But in this situation, obviously, not what happened. Then you have the player pause, which is what happened in this scenario, which can only be done for a number of reasons, although it doesn't necessarily say that these are the only acceptable reasons. It's a little bit of a gray area, but we're going to assume that these are the only ones that generally you will not get in trouble for, which is an unintentional disconnect. Makes sense.
Yep.
Secondly, a hardware or software malfunction or physical interference with a player, like fan gank. That is the actual
Fan
that's
gang.
That's the legal term. Yeah, fan gank. And those honestly are the, at least in the rulebook, given the reasons allowed for a pause. So referees can always cause for a pause, players, when there is specific acceptable reasons.
Yeah, and so this one was a hardware issue and therefore a perfectly reasonable time to request a pause. And then it was, I guess, theoretically a directed pause after that, right? So the ref would say, Faker, you may pause the game. Faker then pauses the game, flashes instead, and then pauses. And
So-
that's sort of the situation we're in. So at the moment, everything's absolutely fine. Everything is just
No mistakes
exactly,
from either side.
yeah, no mistakes from either side, outside of the fact that Faker has pressed his flash button unintentionally, right?
Yes. I think it's important to note the distinction between why a player would pause versus why a referee would pause. Normally, there are a team of referees watching like hawks. They're all in the lobby, and they all have the ability to pause. So usually when an issue happens, referees react immediately. When you see a pause happen in the LCK where the thing pops up and says game is paused and it's got a little scrolly bar, usually that's when a referee like instantly reacts to a small issue that's happened. He sees a player like walk past a turret or something, which happened earlier in the season, and the referee's like, okay, something's wrong, and the referee will instantly pause. The reason why a player would pause is because they want to react faster, because maybe they see something a referee doesn't see quickly enough, like their mouse stops working, the referee can't physically see that watching from the game's like observer client, and that's when a player would pause. So I just want to make that distinction, like why wouldn't players just always pause, or why would a player ever pause? Like sometimes a player can see something, and that's why those reasons are listed to why a player would be allowed to pause. This was a case where the referees didn't pause because they were trying to identify the situation, and then Faker, and it was very unclear because they thought the issue was resolved, and then Faker decided to pause because he was given permission to after communicating with the referees, which is also very rare. Usually a player's not ever talking to a referee about whether he should or should not pause.
Thankfully, we have this video to go over exactly what went on, right? So there was a bit of dialogue considering the fact that there was an issue prior, and so checking to see whether it was the same issue cropping back up again or whether it was a new one was sort of what was going on here, which is why there was the added dialogue, right?
And to talk about examples of like pauses that are misused, we actually had one last year with Umti actually thinking that he had his extended range on Xinjiao and he thought it was bugged because he kind of panicked, but he hadn't actually gotten the upgrade yet. So he paused and was actually given a warning. There was kind of an extended pause there, and I think it was very embarrassing for everyone involved, but like that did
Yeah.
happen, and that is one example of a pause that someone used incorrectly because they wanted to say like a bug happened in the game and I want to address this, was not correct, and then the LCK ruled like we're not gonna like you're not in trouble, you're not suspended, but like now Frederick Brion has a warning, which can affect your standings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a completely reasonable take. So like people make mistakes. League of Legends is such a complex game, and
Oh,
I
absolutely,
think just
And
just
also,
a normal warning. Is
let's
completely
remember
fine.
that this whole situation is ran by humans. And what do humans do best? Mistakes. So, look, we all make mistakes, and this is an example of some mistakes. So shall we get into those? Because in the ensuing moments, and this is something that the LCK team has admitted was mishandled, was that once the game was paused, Faker just accidentally flashed, and they wanted to make sure that game number 2 was in the most competitively accurate situation, right? Like, because if he doesn't have flash in the mid lane at level 1, it's a horrible situation, right? Even if the team doesn't know, if he's then ganked very early, then it's very confusing if he just straight up dies without flashing and things like this. So it would have been a horrible situation for Faker, and he was like requesting a remake immediately, as you can hear in the footage. And so the referees basically got together. So from this point on, after the pause happened, it's not one person. It's not one ref or anything like that. This is a team working together on finding the best solution. They deemed that the best solution was to chrono break the game and to bring us back to a point before the flash has actually occurred. This would not impact any of the players. It would, of course, mean that the pause has to go on for a little bit longer. However, the largest mistake that actually happened was a breakdown in communication. So not only did the referees not manage to tell the broadcast team in time, but they were also unable to tell Damwon in time. And I think it's very important when a chrono break is happening that you talk about you talk to the other team, you talk to everyone involved as it's happening, right?
And this is when we get to talk about the mental aspect of this, because Damwon Kia's players were left out of the loop as well. And during a pause, players are, for a large period of time, there's like a threshold. You're not allowed to communicate about the game in any way. So you can't use a pause to your advantage to actually get additional communication or talk about how you're going to engage on a team fight if a pause happens right before one or in the middle of one. And the reason why Damwon's players were, of course, not told anything about this is because if the game was to be resumed, it's an unfair advantage to tell them the Faker has no flash. Because he has no flash, they could use that to their advantage. And then eventually the Damwon Kia coaching staff was told late, and so the first reaction any coaching staff is going to have is like, whoa, like, well, that's his fault, like, he accidentally flashed. I'm not cool with that.
Yeah, and
so that caused a delay.
Yeah. This is the other thing as well, and we need to be very clear about this. There was a breakdown in communication when Damwon found out that the game was being chronobroken, right? Chronobreaked? Not entirely sure how you're
Yes.
supposed to say that. Chronobroken? Anyway, and then when Damwon found out exactly what had happened and in the order of things happening and things like this, like we did, getting full oversight,
Because this took about like.
it
that's
took
why
20
so
minutes.
long.
It was a long time, right? But it was the fact that Damwon were not given enough information as to why they fought back, right? And there's a lot of people that a lot of takes that I saw online that were like, oh, they're just trying to drag this out. They'd argue for anything. Like, no. Like, if you're told that the enemy team accidentally flashed and we're chrono breaking, you're like, holy crap, the whole league has gone to shit. Like, like, what the hell is going on here, right? I was even talking about this on the desk. I didn't have full information, right? We were just inferring a lot of things. And if someone accidentally flashes and then you chrono break the game, the implications for that are astronomically awful for competitive integrity and for wanting a game to just continue, right? Because otherwise everyone's like pausing all the time. It's like, I missed my skill shot, better pause it. Can I get a chrono
Wrong
break?
runes. Can we read it? Can we regame?
Yeah. It's absolutely absurd. And so like you can understand why you would get limited information and then react very strongly to it. So for those blaming Damwon for that, please stop doing that. That is just not okay. And then as soon as Damwon got full information, then they were like, oh, well, that's totally fine then. Let's chrono break and get back into the game. Unfortunately, all this communication, and this is where like the mental aspect comes in, because if you talk about it all compressed, right, and the timeline isn't actually fully given to you, then you're like, oh, well, bit of an oopsie, you know. After that 3 minutes of sorting that out, we'll get back into the game and everything's fine. But no, it was 20 plus minutes, right? And this is where it starts weighing on you. And we know that all of these players are like really jazzed up trying to get into this game.
This is D match.
Yeah, and also at the beginning of a game 2, after a game that you've just lost, those are moments where you're feeling a heck of a lot of pressure. And so as far as like the emotional stress that you're feeling, I'd imagine that for Damwon Kia in that moment, things weren't feeling super crash hot.
Yeah, and you could see it in the gameplay as well. I think it did affect them mentally. I think it did affect the game, and you know, these are things that do happen, and I think that a lot of leagues would just not acknowledge this, right? And like, I'm glad that we're having this conversation now because I do think it affected Showmaker's performance in the second game. Like, I 100% do think it affected him. And yes, he is a professional, and he's won 3 LCK titles back to back, and also has won a world championship. But you know, this is his hardest start of his season he's had in a while, right? This is the most important matches we went into. And I think we're all ready to admit, and we already had a PR statement issued by LCK that like we messed up a little bit here as a unit. Like
a lot. I think we messed up a massive amount.
The ref issue with Faker not getting his pause immediately was, you know, something that we can explain, but it was still not the right choice to actually deny the pause, or like not deny the pause, but to be like wait, hold on, like they're trying to figure it out. And then also I think the other issue that isn't talked about as much is how long this took, which is what we were kind of getting into here, because I think that's when it affects the Damwon players the most, is like the length at which this happened, where Damwon Kia players don't know what's happening, and like they're starting to think all sorts of like really angry thoughts or frustrated thoughts, and it's going to affect your mindset going into a game 2. You're already down a game in the series. So I just wanted to acknowledge
I want to like just cut in real quick, because we need to also acknowledge the fact that this does not mean that this is an asterisk or anything like that. There was no expectation
I mean,
that T1 were not going to smash this series.
T1
right?
were also very, like...
Yeah, and
they were in a
T1
better
would have
position.
been absolutely...
They had more information.
Yeah, they would have been
but
frustrated.
They're still unhappy.
Yeah.
It's also comparable to if you are playing Slay the Spire on, 20 minutes feels like nothing. But if you're sitting in my personal experience, for example, at the dentist office, and you're waiting, and your dentist tells you it's 5 more minutes.
Well, now with a Nintendo Switch, you can be playing Slay the Spire
Well,
in the dentist office.
No. You don't bring your Switch.
But you're with all your friends.
Such dark places.
You're with all your friends, and you're not allowed to talk to them.
Yeah,
you can't speak to them.
You're
right.
just sitting there, and like I think that's it's a great example of the relativity of time, where the impact that's going to have is, I think, really big. And I don't think that that is something that takes away from T1's victory at all. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because it doesn't. But it is also unfortunate for Damwon. And that's just really the big loss of the situation, is that everyone lost, because the response towards the ref was
this is the worst.
ludicrous.
Let's just be good humans to each other and try a little bit of empathy.
The thing that really got to me was obviously the vitriol and the witch hunting that occurred regarding the ref, which that part already in of itself should make you question, like, what are we doing here, right? Like, yes, it was a mistake, and the ref was talked to by the LCK. This is someone that has undergone extensive training.
Yeah, I think we can take a moment now to actually talk about what it takes to become an LCK ref.
The only final point that I want to make on it, and this is something that if you were watching the broadcast, we didn't know what actually happened until the next day. I know this is full PSAs, but this is a really important one. We didn't know not until the next day. We're at LOL Park. We have G-Sun in our ears, and G-Sun knows everything, right? It's G-Sun.
Well, actually, this is the point. The broadcast team didn't know soon enough, right? That's the massive mistake,
exactly,
right? It's like they should know, but no one knew anything.
That's the point I was going to make. Thank you, Max. This
I found out halfway through my rant that you were about to say that, and I'm sorry for ruining your setup.
It's fine, no, because the point is, the reason why we're so frustrated is because there were multiple people on Twitter that were just being taken at face value. And maybe if the broadcast doesn't know what's going on, you shouldn't trust a random Discord or Twitter comment that says, no, this is actually what has happened. The ref said, deal with it, Faker. And like, those things are just, especially now that the thing has
never happened.
That categorically never happened, and this ties into a larger societal issue that we have right now, which is people are for some reason much more believing of a complete random on the internet than the actual LCK broadcast that is being held to insane standards, that they are fair, that they are transparent, and we're not going to believe those. Those are I don't trust the LCK, but random
or actual literal comms that were released.
Yes.
And
But
translated.
unverified Twitter account of an LCK fan. That's where you get the and that's and that is one thing, but to then take that info and turn that into personal attacks is something that honestly is not something that should happen in the LCK.
That should never happen, ever.
No.
And it's important because people trust those kinds of comments because it fits their, I don't know if it's confirmation bias or it's some other kind of bias in their minds where it's like, this is my team and they were negatively affected, so somebody must have messed up, somebody must have had something against us, but that's actually just not true. Like the referee wasn't out to get Faker. They weren't trying to like give them an opportunity. So I really want to nail that point home, like don't just believe anything because that's what you think happened in your mind because that fits your bias. Just try to look at it objectively. I think that's really important in this day and age.
Yeah, you can always find the opinion that you want on the internet. And if you search hard enough, doesn't matter how wrong you are, you'll find someone else just as wrong as you. That's just a fact. That's how it works. Unfortunately, that creates an echo chamber, and then you have this blow up effect, and then you have people that are now grabbing pitchforks looking for this person that had an interaction that upon review we have decided was actually a fine interaction, and then it was a group of referees that actually made the mistake.
Yeah.
That dragged all this out and actually caused a lot of damage to how the game would have gone. I don't think that it would have turned out any differently. However, I know that there was a lot of frustration, and this whole blow-up would not have happened. We've had so many pauses in the history of the LCK, right? We've had the crazy skin issue. We've had Cuve's toilet issues. We've had Docdarm toilet issues. We've had so many different issues.
Bang chair issue.
Bang,
and then the follow-up Wolf chair issue as well. I also don't like my chair. Please replace it. Bang got a new cool chair. I want one too. That actually happened.
It's very, very cute. I remember watching that. Oh my god. We had some fantastic chair issues. Thankfully, Spo TV called everything an issue and had them as a lower third. The graphics team were absolutely fantastic. I wonder who was working there. I think it was G-Sun. Of course it was, because she's just the best. getting some producer points.
Nice.
PogChamp.
So, referees.
Yeah, so let's actually go into what it takes to become an LCK referee, because I think that there are a lot of people that were making some assumptions as to what it means to be an LCK referee. Level 1 referees have done at least 200 matches in 3 years, and Level 2 are referees who've judged at least 30 matches in 2 years. Those with Level 2 and 1 licenses partake a 17-hour LCK referee training program, which ends with a written exam, a tryout, and an interview. And trainees with the highest scores are then chosen as the LCK referees. So basically, it's ludicrous. The entrance, the level that you need to be at in order to become a referee in the LCK. It kind of cycles back to a lot of what has been spoken about with wanting to do online and needing to have a referee there. The LCK, and here in Korea, especially in esports, the need for competitive integrity is extraordinarily high, and everyone does their due diligence to make sure that everything is as fair as possible. And therefore, very stringent rules apply to who can be a referee in the LCK. So for those that think that this person was not qualified or made errors in what was happening in-game, you were probably misinformed as to how incredibly informed this person actually is.
And it's even taking this into account, it's still fine if someone makes the error. And that's the recurring theme of
It was
tonight.
a group of people that made an error, right? Because they were probably afraid of backlash, which occurred anyway because of what they did. And it's, hey.
And I'll lift the veil a little bit. We all love Atlus, right? He's amazing. He does so well. And it took him 15,000 tries to just read out the basic referee information. And that is something that that's gonna happen to everyone. And honestly, I think that's normal. Maybe we're a real sport now, you know? Everyone hates the refs in any sport ever. I played competitive hockey, hated
Yeah.
the refs. They were always in favor of the other
Always
team.
against, always
Yeah.
against my team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, another thing is, those are the minimums, right? Like, you need at least 200 hours, at least, right?
200
But
games.
200 games.
200
Yeah.
games, sorry, which is more than 200 hours. Well, it depends. But anyway, like, a lot of the refs have been here for a long time. Like, a lot of these guys have years of experience, and they're on the team as well. The majority of them are level 1. Yeah, I'm sure there are some new refs in there, and mistakes are still made. So, like, these guys are the best that we have in Korea.
The majority
so.
of these people who are putting in those 200 games are doing it through the Academy series that Kesper runs, then Challengers, and then, of course, the LCK. Like, for those who were level 2 who got in through interviews, then get up to their level 1 SAS, and there's kind of like a tier list there.
After passing the exam.
After passing the exam
and then getting
the
chosen
interview.
out of
and the
a whole
written-
bunch of
and the
others.
tryout.
And there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of other esports that you could put those 200 games into, like that are KESPA sanctioned. Like Kart Rider's even a thing, and that actually gets really hard to referee. Trust me, I've watched a lot of Kart Rider. There's a lot of different ways to look at how much these refs have seen, and how many pauses they've seen, and how many games that were played both offline and online that they refereed, and all the different issues that happens with that, and getting people into lobbies, and peripheral issues, and these were not noobs like that we were talking about. Even though they made errors, like, these people are extremely experienced, more experienced than you're going to get probably in any other region of esports referees. So I do think it's important to note that, like, these people have a background in this for hours and hours and hours. They are extremely proficient at what they do.
Yeah, and I think that what all of this is attempting to do is to tell you guys that you can trust them, right? We trust them every single day. We've had no issues trusting them for many, many years here in the LCK. And I think that I don't think there's been an outcome of a situation that I've disagreed with ever when it comes to rulings that the LCK has made about in-game issues and things like this. And that is because stringent rules are put in place in order to make sure that competitive integrity is upheld. The problem with this, and even I was very upset after that game, right? It was very difficult to commentate. Like, I was livid because I didn't have all of the facts. I didn't understand. And so I was reacting very similarly to a lot of how the fans were reacting. But after you get all of the facts, you understand how the timeline worked. You're like, the biggest mistake was not communicating effectively and quickly enough, but it wasn't actually any action that had taken place on either side. And when it comes, like, when I found out that there were people that are looking for where this referee lived,
scouring
and things
the
like
vaults,
that, like, that's
updating data.
That's when you realize that things have gone absolutely way too far. And trying to find where this person lived because of a situation, like, where was the negative? Like, why are you so angry? Like, what is wrong with you? Like,
It's time for a reality check, guys.
says Atlus angrily.
But I just want to say, like, my final thing on this is, like, there will be somebody who's going to write something in this comment, but before you write it, like, think about what you're about to write. Like, don't write something that's going to embarrass yourself, because maybe you think you're in the moment, you're like, I'll tell those guys who think that we're being overreacting and we're too angry. Like, no, don't embarrass yourself, please. Just don't write it.
And if you want to be angry too, then there are other places to do that. Boxing, really good. You could take
League
that
of
up.
Legends solo queue.
League of
Going
Legends
for a
solo queue.
run?
Going for a run, very good.
Yeah, please don't bring that to the solo
exercise
queue.
is good.
Yeah. Touching
Let's
grass.
not perpetuate the solo queue.
Yeah, touching grass
Like to
generally
be
a
with
pretty good
happy
way
people.
to balance yourself out. Hunting people down on the internet,
Also,
probably not a good move.
like, I know that it's always like the vocal minority a lot of the time, where it's like there are some bad eggs in every group of people, and the more people that exist in that group, generally there's a higher chance that there are more bad eggs and more of the vocal minority. So I know that the majority of any fan base or any group of people is going to be good people that respect the referees and the broadcast and everything like that, and they're not writing bad comments, but there will be some of those people out there that write the insane ones where it's like, this video was doctored. They're trying to tear down T1. Like,
And here's the thing too.
It's just the vocal minority, and I know that the majority of you guys are fine. So
if you are a
hearts out
good,
to you.
if you are a good egg, and one of your friends who also loves the same thing as you is looking like he might be one of he's like on the
He
line
might
of
be
being a
dipping his
bad
toe
egg.
into bad
Yeah,
egg
be like,
territory.
hey,
yep.
like I saw what you posted. Like, let's try to be better as a group. Let's try to stay away from that stuff. You know.
And calling people out in person for their really ridiculous shit online is actually a really good way to make it stop. Because often you have that level of anonymity and you start thinking that it's okay to say this stuff. Read out what they wrote to them and say, this is what you did. And watch the reaction. I've done it before. It's hilarious. People get very embarrassed by the stuff that they've written.
Honestly, I kind of like it because it gives me an endless supply of copy pastas I can use as break screen. So I think it's great.
That's the best way, actually.
Yeah,
It's
it's actually really nice.
Thank you for bearing with us. I just really feel like we needed to get all of this out there, air some of the laundry from the week, and make sure that we can all come together and move on and enjoy some LCK. And speaking of enjoying some LCK, we've got some looking like idiots to do. Because you guys have all seen DRX versus Gen G, we have not. We will be undergoing that series in a matter of hours, and it's time to make some predictions, time to look a little bit silly, and then you guys can put your comments down below as to how silly you thought we actually were.
Or how accurate we were, because we're kind of spooky about that a little bit. Sometimes we like predict things really well.
Yeah, and sometimes we look like morons. And I might look like a moron because I'm really kind of feeling...
You look great today, Alice.
Huh?
You look great today.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel some barrel and deft action for this one. I think it's going to be 3 games, but I think
Let's
it's going to be
go
a
with
DRX win.
Alice's prediction first.
So you were saying, Atlus?
What?
You were saying
Three games,
who's gonna
three
win?
games. And
3 games? I think it's DRX win.
2-1? Okay.
Yeah.
Elaborate.
So you were just already set up to look silly. Like that's why you were going with the silly angle on the comments instead of us being right and
trying to
smart.
cover himself.
I want to, but I think that every episode should be educational, and there should be an opportunity for you to exercise your newfound skill of being nice, even though someone says something wrong.
Max, they lost 2-0 to Hanwha Life. I love Chorus, but like
Hey,
that's not right.
They then won after that.
So
Let's start with Wolf.
Yeah, let's go.
So I thought Hanwha played that series very well. We've talked about it a lot. Like it's kind of been like the poster for Chorus fans. Like, look at what I did and look at how great our series was. And that was a really great performance from Hanwha Esports. That was an overperformance from them, but they played it very well around specific strategy, right? So I don't take that as like a negative for DRX per se, because I thought that they did fall over a little bit, and we expected them to win the series, but it was also, again, overperformance from HLE.
Good take.
I think that right now DRX are winning a lot of games because their bottom duo is insanely strong. Deft is carrying really hard, and they're starting to come into their own a little bit in terms of Kingen. His inconsistencies are starting to wear off a little bit. I think they will be 2-0. It won't even be close, though, because because I think that right now, mechanically, there's still a massive gap between every player who isn't named Deft on DRX and their opposition. And some might argue there's even potentially a gap between Ruler and Deft, but it's Lehens versus Barrel, right? Chovy.
That
Doran.
is barrel favored. In his defense,
I disagree, but
I
just think
I
it's
just
a
wanted to
mechanical
make
gap.
that noise.
Yeah,
I'm just like
gap.
remembering Hanwha Life Esports, Lehens, and who Barrel was at that time, winning every championship.
Well, I mean that was next to Viper, and then he got off Hanwha Life. And
Barrel
won
was
Worlds.
next to Ghost. Okay,
True.
Give him some credit.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that just means that if you get off Hanwha Life, you need to win Worlds the next year. That's how it goes. So
right.
you
Listen,
know what to do, Chovy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's listened before.
Deft.
See,
Anyway, yeah, all I'm saying is mechanical gap, I think, between the two teams is going to be super high. And everybody knows that my initial take on Gen G is like, oh, how well are all these players who are one key part of their roster where they get all the resources working together, how is it going to work? It's working. The mechanical skill we knew was always going to be there, but the teamwork is also stronger than I predicted, and I think Gen G is going to take this series just because they're, even if they don't draft as well as DRX does, they're just the stronger team mechanically. I think that's going to be a gap that DRX can't fill just yet. That's my
Damn, that was
take.
brutal.
Game
Chronicler.
one. Game one goes to Gen G naturally because they're the better team, and I think they have a monstrous topside advantage. I'd be more inclined to actually give the edge to Deft and Barrel, and that's not a slight to Lehens and Ruler, but I think Deft and Barrel have been insane, both in form. Barrel took a little bit longer to get going than Deft, who's just been good since the beginning, but I think that bot lane has been exceptional, but the drafting of DRX is not. And here's the key thing. They lose game one, and then King and Pioshik and Zeka all, they can't take it anymore. It's a mental breakdown. They get off stage, and then Clear, Satep, and Peach come in with the steel chair.
This is going to be an actual analytical
And
point,
then-
not a
and
fan
then-
fiction.
and then they also get clapped because as much as I love those players, it's not happening.
They
I
aren't
think-
even going to come out, Mal. They're not coming out.
I know. I'm
It's
joking.
not going to happen.
It's not allowed. There are no emergency call-ups this week for DRX. The reason why I'm trying to make it entertaining, because I would be shocked if Gen G actually get beaten here. I think that the team has seen also the true return of form of players like Jovi, who had a pretty, not even bad, just kind of really lackluster.
He was not
Valdes where-
amazing, and that was disappointing.
No, I mean, like I
think that's fair assessment.
I think like he was worse than he was in summer of 2021. Like I think he had a bit of a decline, and now he's very much on the upswing again. So there is just no matchup between Peanut versus Pioshik. Is a huge gap. As much as you can sometimes levy some criticism toward Peanut for some of his late game decision making. His early game have been stellar. They've just got enough of a absolutely clapping teams with Renekton in Italy, and I don't think that DRX is going to be able to stand up in. But the bot lane matchup will be great.
Yeah, what I'll say is I think it'll also be a 2-0 for Gen G over DRX. I think that is the objective expectation that a lot of people should have. I'm not sitting right next to Atlus right now. So
my play-by-play brother just
I know,
placing
just
me in the
dumped you in
bin.
the trash.
Whoa.
But I think that, if we take a look at some of the matches that have been lost, like Gen G going down to KT and stuff like that, I think that was a slight lapse in their play. I think that KT came with some very aggressive play, and that kind of caught Gen G off guard, and they were able to take 2 in a row. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I think that Gen G are just too good of a team for that to happen. DRX had it happen to them as well, based off of their loss to Hama Life Esports. So I think they're both coming in here with big expectations. They're both going to be preparing for this matchup the most for this week, which should make for a great matchup. I still think it's going to be 2-0. Jinx is extremely high priority right now in terms of, we see Caitlyn banned away all the time. We see
Zeri?
I wanted to say Zeka, but Zeri banned away all the time. So Jinx is always like number one priority. And if DRX on blue side, they might even have to first pick it if they want to get that for Deft.
They
And that
have
can
before.
They
Yeah,
have
that
before.
was 2 losses. That
And
wasn't great.
like they might do it again because it puts you behind a lot on getting like a really great jungler, and so those red side bans are going to be incredibly important. It's going to be, in terms of like the bottom lane, Deft and Beryl are insane because Deft is super overperforming and Beryl is like maybe one of the best leaders we've had in a long time. Like we saw what he did for Dom1, but now like every single time I listen to those comms, it's like, do this, do that, do this. Beryl is just he's running the show. Okay, he is the one voice, and it's incredible what he can bring to a team in terms of what we were just talking about with leadership with Dom1 earlier on in the episode. It's
Yeah,
very,
seeing what
very
happened to them
important.
without him actually does prove that
Yeah.
point, right?
It's crazy what Beryl brings to the team. So while Lehens, in my mind, might be slightly mechanically more gifted and talented right now, I think that Beryl brings more to the overall team. And DRX do have a lot of great points, but I think that Gen G, they're just on they're in a better position right now, even in terms of the draft and the way the meta is. I think it's just going to be too strong and 2-0.
All right, I got to defend my my obviously
Do it, Max.
somewhat outlandish prediction, but someone's got to do it, right? Because like I get like the good odds if my prediction does come true. Or I'm just talking this entire time while you guys are KEKWing because I am
you're
already wrong.
Talking about deaths, that's okay.
Well, no, that's not what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is their most recent series against Fred at Brion, and the fact that I think that a lot of people undersold just how well DRX navigated game number 1. And the way that they played 1-3-1, I thought was coordinated absolutely beautifully. They took a huge risk with their draft, but they navigated it in a way that made it look like they just were better and understood exactly what they wanted to do. And when a team has that level of understanding of their drafting situation, the tendencies of their opposition, it really does give me a lot of hope. And what we've seen from Gen G is a lot of overconfidence in situations when they feel like they're better. So if DRX are going to be able to plan as effectively as they did against Fred at Brion and really dismantle how they play the game, then I believe that there is a good shot, assuming we hit a heads on Pioshik. Because he's either amazing or just not good. So we need Pioshik to exist. As soon as that happens, I'm looking good. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know what you thought in the comment section below, and we will see you next week with hopefully another really fun segment as well. We thought this one was a little bit more serious, so didn't want to include another, ad for Chronicler's stream or anything like that.
Next time,
One was enough.
Yeah, one was definitely enough.
I get a little awkward with all the attention.
Yeah, no, it's okay. You've got a
Did
interesting.
you get your soup, by the way?
I did.
In that stream, you got your soup?
Yeah, it was mushroom
What kind of
soup.
soup? Oh, nice.
Mushroom soup, yeah. It was like, started with a roux and then threw in the mushrooms,
Great.
caramelized onions.
Thanks for watching,
some
guys.
herbs.
We'll see you next time.
It's great.